Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the latest move by the government to sweep away another essential foundation of democracy, the rule of law as applied to them at any rate. Moves are now gathering pace to allow the government to literally vote themselves above the law. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So on Monday, a couple of things happened. First of all, the government was distracting us all with their pretend war on drugs. The Prime Minister visited some officers and even posted footage of himself with a sniffer dog all over him. Not a single reaction from the officers in attendance, mind you. I'm pretty sure I know how it should have gone. Prime Minister, Rover seems to be very interested in you. Yes, he's very friendly, isn't he? Very good with animals, you know. Yeah. You see, the thing is, he's not just jumping up at you as an excited pet dog would do. He's sniffing in your pockets. Oh, yes, how odd. He's a sniffer dog, you see. He sniffs out drugs. That's what he's trained to do. I must have got these trousers mixed up with Michael Gove. No, sir, the Minister for Levelling Down is significantly slimmer than you are, Prime Minister. I'm going to have to ask you to accompany me to the station, sir. But no, not a bit of it. Sniffer dog all over a known drug user, sniffing his pockets, and the attending officers just stand around as gormless as you like. But while this was going on the front page of the Times on the same day was a headline. Boris Johnson plans to let ministers throw out legal rulings. All very calm, all very measured. No great alarm at the prospect of the government literally setting themselves above the law. Cue a lot of people being rather more alarmed than the folks at the Times and wondering why there are not mass protests at this move. The answer, of course, is that just as with everything else they're doing to sweep away democracy in the UK, hardly anyone knows what is happening. And it's not even like the government was quiet about these plans. It was all in their manifesto 2 years ago. Just over 2 years ago, on the 6th of December 2019, a couple of days ago and 2 years ago, I published a video on page 48 of Boris Johnson's manifesto. We were gearing up to the general election. I was alarmed. It was basically the main page in a how-to guide on destroying democracy. It was all very clear. A refusal to allow people a confirmatory vote on Brexit. A refusal to allow the people of Scotland the right to self-determination. A promise to take away Parliament's power to decide when, if ever, early general elections should be held. A promise to fiddle boundaries to make it easier for the Conservatives to win 100% of the power with an ever-shrinking minority of the popular vote. Championing the first-past-the-post system that means that the majority of voters are ignored by the government 100% of the time. Voter suppression to prevent many people who would not traditionally vote Conservative to not be able to vote for anyone. Laying the groundwork to make hate speech lawful, removing what few protections we have against a media that can pour whatever poison it likes into our public discourse, misusing our data for their own ends, removing human rights laws, passing powers from Parliament directly into the hands of the government, and making the government immune to judicial review. It was all there in plain sight, all crammed into one page. But too few took it seriously. Being fair, it's more likely that too few found out about it. While people were voting for Boris Johnson, not in particularly high numbers because, they were voting for him because, he's better than Jeremy Corbyn, isn't he? They were actually voting into power, not just the worst choice in actual fact, but the most destructive Prime Minister this country has ever had. The fear is that by the time he and his cabal are finished, they may have done more damage to this country than any government in our centuries-long history. And when you look at past Prime Ministers who have damaged us, it was generally at least inadvertent. They just messed up. They didn't mean to. On my part, my greatest hope was that the government would be too incompetent to carry these threats out. That there would be enough Tory MPs who knew it was wrong and would stand up against it. It's one thing to say you want to destroy democratic checks and balances and to have the administrative power in theory to do so. It's another thing to have the intelligence to work out how to do it. And when he promoted the likes of Dominic Raab and Priti Patel, you thought, we may get away with this. We may get away with it. But they certainly didn't lack for motivation. Look what they've been doing under cover of COVID. Instead of dealing with the pandemic, they have been throwing our lives away in order to raid the Treasury for themselves, their friends and their sponsors. They've been legislating to make protest unlawful. People are wondering why we're not in the streets in our millions before it's too late. I do not know. Maybe because the police are refusing to sanction large protests. Maybe because people have seen how heavy-handed the Met are at any rate against peaceful protests against the government. Maybe COVID fears. Maybe a mixture. Maybe something else. But very soon, it won't just be that we don't have the inclination, we won't have the right. We will not have the legal right. It will even be unlawful for me to advertise a planned protest. It's not just the policing bill that makes physical protest unlawful on pain of prison, but the online harms bill has a lot of vague provisions. A House of Lords report said that the bill could cause unjustifiable and unprecedented interference with the freedom of expression. That's what Parliament said. Something you'd think Conservatives would be against, but they're not. They know that the police are so in their control that the only legal action taken will be against those opposed to their clique. They'll be fine. They'll be above the law. It won't apply to them. If this law was going to be consistently applied, they'd be all over it. They wouldn't be allowing this through. But they know it's not. Anyone on the right of politics will be allowed free rein to say whatever they like. Once these bills go through, all that's left is the Human Rights Act and the courts to protect us. The government are intending to replace the Human Rights Act with a hollow potato. Yes, you will say, the Human Rights Act merely places international human rights laws onto our statute books. We will still be subject to the convention. This is not a government that respects international laws. They want to remove it from domestic law so that the British courts can't interfere. They do not care about international courts. As for the courts themselves, the government have so far been unable to simply remove the rights of judges to hold them to account. They wanted to remove the concept of judicial review altogether. Just say, no, you can't have judges deciding whether the government's broken the law. Don't be ridiculous. But this has obviously been a step too far for them, at least for now. So their plan now is, and this could be a stepping stone rather than the main aim, their plan now is for what's called an interpretation bill. So what would happen, as I understand it, each year the government takes along a big pile of all their judgments against them. They've been found to have acted unlawfully in case X, Y, Z, and goodness knows how many others. And they ask Parliament to strike them out. They say to Parliament, look, we don't actually think we're guilty. Would you mind voting these judgments away? So this is the process. The government break the law. Someone takes them to court, seeks a judicial review granted. The government try to force them to back down by wasting a load of our public money on raising the stakes so high that in the hopes that the plaintiffs back off for fear of going bankrupt. When this doesn't work, the court passes judgment that the government broke the law. The government then make a big pile of these judgments, because there's a lot of them, and then on a particular date they go to Parliament and ask them to vote to set aside these judgments. Now this is dangerous for three reasons. First, as long as enough Tory MPs continue to play along with this travesty of justice, it means the government are above the law. Now bear in mind, they have already broken the law many times. Imagine how brazen they are going to be if they know they'll be let off. Doesn't matter what a judge says, Parliament will let them off. Imagine what greater harms, what greater atrocities they have planned once they know they are no longer subject to the courts. The second danger is that the government will seed mistrust in our court system. They will argue that these judges are finding ministers guilty, but, when we go, their appeal will be the elected representatives in Parliament. And when these elected representatives, your representatives, are considering all aspects of the case in, about 2.5 minutes, they are finding that the judges were in error. This is incredibly dangerous. It's like the enemies of the people all over again. Only magnitudes worse, because this is Parliament, not some rogue newspaper. The third danger is that in order to avoid such an outcome, judges consciously decide to simply try starting very hard to find in the government's favour in these cases. Now, this has still got the effect of making the government above the law, but also those few of us paying attention will never realise that it's a stitch-up. We may suspect it, but we can't know. Any critically thinking person sees a guilty verdict in court. It's not called guilty, the government have acted unlawfully. Then the mates of the accused set aside the judgment. We smell a rat. We know there's something not right there. But if the judge never finds the government has broken the law in the first place, How do we know that a judge delivered a corrupt decision, or if the government on that occasion genuinely weren't in breach of the law? I couldn't tell. I'm not a legal expert. I depend upon the expertise and independence of the judiciary for these things. We are sleepwalking into the abyss here. Look at what the government have already done in just 2 years, and with a deadly pandemic slowing them down. Imagine what they can still do before the next general election, which may now be more likely to be 2023. It doesn't look like they can get away with it next year. There's still plenty on their checklist of authoritarian control. Page 48 is still not complete. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.